Hello.
Hey, everyone.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome to the Roy and Kim show. How's it going, Roy?
It's going good.
It's another Wednesday in paradise.
It wouldn't be a Wednesday without some technical difficulties.
That's right.
My computer finished an update 2 minutes ago, so I'm getting my notes kind of settled. Sorry for that, everyone.
That's okay. We're all here.
Yeah. How are you doing, Kim?
Good. It's been a busy week since we last chatted. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yes, it has.
So, and it doesn't seem to get any calmer, but that's okay. I'm not going to complain about that. Just going to go with it.
Which is a nice segue for our guest.
That's right. Perfect segue for our guest. So just to do quick intros, I'm Kim with Team Diva.
Yeah, and I'm Roy with Team Diva and Caldwell Bank of Bane.
Yep. And today we have Stephanie Gailing. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi there.
So some of you I bet many of you know Stephanie because she, one, has been on the show before. She was on last year.
That's right.
And two, she is the Team Diva astrologer. So if you know Team Diva, you know that we're super into astrology for us and our folks and the team. And we always have Stephanie do team charts for us. Our chart was done, like the team actually has, like the business has an astrology chart that Stephanie did for us. So, and Stephanie is also a writer, and she has written 3 books. 4th is coming out in April, correct, Stephanie?
Oh, wow.
The last one was The Complete Book of Dreams, which we have. I have not cracked it yet, but I'm going to.
We have a copy of it as well.
You do have it, right? Roy has a copy as well. Yay. So we're super excited to have you on the show today. Oh, tell us a little bit about your next book that's coming out in April.
Yeah, so the next book is called The Complete Guide to Astrological Self-Care. So in 2009, I published a book called Planetary Apothecary, which wove together wellness and astrology. This is an updated and expanded version of it.
Oh, great.
Beautifully illustrated and designed. And I'm really excited about this book on so many levels.
Oh, that's fabulous. I'm super excited. We do have a copy of Planetary Apothecary as well. So super, super excited about it. Your new book coming in. And I think, radical seems to be the word we're using a lot in the last couple of years. And I think radical self-care is a word we've been using a lot with our friends and family and each other, right? Because it's definitely a time where we need to be focusing on our personal, mental, emotional, physical health. Mm-hmm. So, and you were on the show last year, and we tried to figure out what date it was. It was April.
I think it was like the end of April, yeah.
In my brain, it was like February that you were on the show, but it really was the end of April.
Well, you got to remember
last year.
Yeah, last year didn't start until March. Like we kind of got a reset.
Totally.
In March. So yeah, April would totally feel like February in that case.
I know. And I think we talked about last year, the theme was Pisces. Oh yeah, by the way, if you don't know, all 3 of us are Pisces.
That's right.
So Pisces.
Happy early birthday, you guys.
What?
Happy early birthday to both of you.
To you too. Stephanie is a February birthday, right? Like
February 26th. Yeah.
Awesome.
Right. Oh yeah, like Michael.
Like
There's
Michael.
a lot of fish swimming around.
Yeah, there are a lot of fish when Michael's online. Hi, Michael. Michael's a February birthday, and Roy and I are literally 2 days apart.
Yeah.
They're March birthdays. So
yeah, and Michael and I have the same birthday actually.
Oh my God, you and Michael have the same birthday? How did I not know that?
That's
God, I should know these things. So last year when you were on the show, the theme I think was radical transformation.
Yes.
And
yeah, I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, I mean, last year's had these 2 really stellar alignments. One was the Saturn-Pluto transit. The other one was the Jupiter-Pluto transit. Mm-hmm. Saturn-Pluto transits happen every 30 odd years, and they always sort of mark a geopolitical shift, and basically Pluto at the center of both of those alignments was all about the pulling down, right? Like it was like the Tower card in the Tarot, and it was about like the stripping down of facades and structures that couldn't hold. And then like really having to like see what ended up, no pun intended, being essential to all of us, and then to start to rebuild from that. And Pluto is about power and control and secrets and, in Capricorn, the rule of law. I mean, all these really big themes. Pluto is actually also is the planet that rules like the elimination system and literal and proverbial shit. And like, I oftentimes thought too, like with the run on toilet paper in the beginning of the year, like, it's like, yeah, we are in a very strongly Pluto year.
Oh my God, that is so funny.
I remember that conversation on your podcast. I remember you guys talking about like literal shit. There's no toilet paper.
Right. Right. I mean, last year was for sure, as we know, a huge amount of transformation, right? Shitty. And a huge amount of transformation for all of us. Transformation on how we live our daily lives, how we live our work lives, what we value in our lives. It was a huge transformation in activism. We saw the rising up of the Black Lives. Not that that's a new movement, but we saw it start to expand and embrace a broader group of people. We also saw the conservative radical right expand and start to include a broader group of people. And then we also saw finally, in a change in government, the lies and the, excuse my language, the shit that we've been fed for 4 years finally start to like overrun enough people that they're like, okay, we have to like get this person out of office and move forward. Right. So lots of transformation and lots of changes, and it's not going away. Is that correct, Stephanie?
Completely not going away. And the other thing too with Pluto, like setting also the state, I mean, obviously all last year, but also still continuing this year in its impact, it's also like Pluto is the planet of the underworld, right? So we actually, we had to look underneath, and the things that were hidden and covered over, whether it be for ourselves in our own personal work or personal shadow, or literally the shit that was being buried, the secrets and the got revealed, or also just like the collective shadow, right? In terms of being like, wait, what is this country really built upon? Let's look at that. Right. And let's take responsibility for that. And let's like make amends for that. Like those things, just like they came out of the closet, right? They came out from under the rug, and there was that like volcanic like eruption of that for us to look at. Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. Is that something that we're still going to be looking at? I mean, is Pluto still having that kind of impact on the universe right now?
Yeah, so the alignments happen like exactly in a certain time period, but you feel them for like years before, you feel them for years after. So it's not like, oh, the last one was in November, like, they're over. It's like we're still sort of in their experience. And I was listening to this talk by an amazing astrologer named Rick Tarnas, and he spoke about it in terms of collective transits. It's like a snowball effect, right? Like it's like they get stronger and stronger because this happened. So everything sort of like bundles upon itself. So we're still in that sort of unearthing or the discovery of what we unearthed, if we say. There's a whole other thing that's then very strong this year that we could talk about if you want, like building upon that.
Oh, totally. I'd love to talk about it. I just want to quick say hello to a couple folks who have popped on. Obviously, Michael, Trenton, and our friend Katie from Hawaii is on.
Oliver too. Hey, Oliver.
And Oliver. Some new faces to our show. Obviously, it's all
Karen.
you.
Karen.
Karen, a realtor pal of ours and friend of ours from Tacoma. Welcome, everyone.
Yeah.
So there's some stuff that I know we were talking originally with Roy. We had our initial conversation. There's a interesting alignment happening this year that's going to have a major impact on what happens in 2021. We're not getting out of this. We're not having an easy year this year, are we, Stephanie?
No, nor this year. A different kind of different.
A different kind of different. Okay.
This year, the alignment that colors this year involves the planet Saturn and the planet Uranus, and they're in what's called a square. So you may start to hear about people say the Saturn-Uranus square, the Saturn-Uranus square. Basically, what we have is this sort of, there's lots of ways we can talk about this sort of standoff, if you will, like a square is a tension. Let's see if I can do this somehow. Between Saturn, which is the old guard, right? The rules, what came before, the Senex, theoretically the wise one, or just the crystallized ways of like, always done that, always done that. So the old guard versus the vanguard versus the new, the out of the ordinary, the rebellious, the breaking the rules, the innovative. So we may see that, as we already seeing that sort of tension. Uranus then sort of like with Saturn, you know, we may also see like disruption. There's a lot of disruptive energy. You know, just sort of like, wait, I thought we were going here. Wait, why are we here? Like words like detour, pivot are really great, like themes to sort of consider this year. Like whether it's like, oh yeah, here's a detour that I didn't create, you know, or I have to pivot, or using that constructively. Okay, this is a year for me to liberate, for me to sort of find what does it mean for me to sort of be free and not in those very defined and etched routes that I always take. How can I choose to pivot? You know, what detour do I maybe want to go on? How do I want to take a different path to getting either where I know I want to go, or how do I maybe now even want to really honestly and courageously redefine what it is that I want?
So is this a good year then, you're saying, for us to all like look at maybe the original decisions we made for ourselves for this year, or look at what we thought our plans might be, or thought our decisions might be that we made last year, and be more open to not just reevaluating them, but redefining them, or, you know, maybe not being so rigid in our path forward.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that is key. Like being more light touch, being more flexible, adaptable. One of my favorite sort of terms is staying bouncy, like not being rigid.
Right.
So maybe also last year when things were stripped away, you know, even your daily routine, you know, everything got upended.
Right.
You know, when things got revealed about what was true and real and what was essential. Okay, now we're building upon that and we're moving forward. But instead of just like, we're going to move forward in this prescribed way, this is the way I always do it, it's like, wait, take a moment to stop and be like, what do I really want? What is this? What would it really look like to live a life with more sort of freedom? And you know, maybe you don't completely redo all of your goals. Maybe you go back to those goals you created, and you just like look at them from a different perspective. Is that really what I want? Like, can I shake it up? You know, can I shake that up a little bit? And even if it's the shake up is like how I go about meeting those aims.
Right.
But leaving some space, like not having a tight grip, so that you can see actually like what can blossom from that perspective.
Oh, interesting. And I think we are currently in Mercury Retrograde. Is that not correct?
You mean, well, aren't we all just sort of testaments to that?
Right. It's like my computer decided to do an upgrade. Right. So is this a good time to do that? I mean, I always hear that Mercury Retrograde is a good time to reevaluate, you know, reconsider, you know, investigate, like go back and look at, you know, the decisions or the ideas or the thoughts that you had, or maybe something that happened, you know, last year or for even a few years ago, and redecide, oh, how can I do that differently? Or how can I have that influence be different in my life, or my decisions for my career, or whatever it is. So is this a good time for folks to do that?
Literally ditto. Like just everybody, what Kim just said, that. Like that was like perfect. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if I could say it again, but I'd be repeating your words. But basically, yeah, go back over. Look to the past for treasures. Go, you know, whether it be people or ideas or things that you learned in the past, see where you can now bring them to the present, to see like how that helps you understand something, and like, you know, go revisiting your ideas for what you wanted to achieve this year, or experience this year, you know, how you wanted to grow or learn. I want to just say, because I might forget, and I don't want to forget, that another really huge theme of this whole year also has to do with collectives and communities.
Oh yeah, tell us a little bit about that theme.
Yeah, so we have, you know, we just had the great conjunction at the end of December in Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius. Both of those planets are in Aquarius most of all this year. So Aquarius is a big theme. Aquarius it's about technology, it's about science and logistics. Like, yay, science this year, right? Like, yay, science this year. Hey,
We need more
is real.
science in our world, don't we? After the last 4 years.
Please.
Exactly. But it also, Aquarius also is the sign of the group, of the collective, of the community, of banding together with like-minded people who share your visions and values. So it feels like that's really the way to both feel a sense of reward, but also to get ahead, whether it's ahead with the things that are important to you, but ideally it's those things that are important to you that are also related to the larger social good. So like power the people, power with the people. You of course see that on all ends. We can say like, hey, let's get together and like fight for racial justice or environmental justice. But there might be people, we know there are people who also like, they have their own beliefs of like where that group can bring them, right? So again, you just watch for the groups. Like the groups are a big theme.
Yeah, I know when we were talking, you were talking about this radicalism and this collectivism and this like, rising up, this almost like revolutionary kind of belief or zeitgeist that we're going to be seeing. And we're always under the belief when people say revolutionary that it means, leftist revolutionaries or like, radical, progressive revolution. But it also could be instigating what happened on January 6th, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that was not, well, no crystal ball, I don't know. But at least the feeling state of that, we'll say, wasn't like a one and done, right? I mean, there is still a lot of fomenting of like people believing whatever it is that they believe, and that there's not, and the radicalization, right? And I mean, and the it's like the radicalization coming from like within inside of the government to radicalize a portion of, our population. That feels like it is going to continue. Yeah,
I think so. Sure. We're seeing it. I mean, we're seeing with it's interesting that a lot of the conversation that's been happening is about not to take us too far off topic, but about Marjorie Taylor Greene and how like the tension that someone like that is bringing to the conversation of like, should we censure her? Should we expel her? Are her ideas too radical? They're super conservative. They're like, Jewish space lasers and, crazy shit that like that the concept that
and whatnot.
Yes, conspiracy theories. The thought that there's someone in government who is elected official that believes these and is sparking that conversation, and that conversation is super like right-wing conservative conversation, right? Not left-wing, radical conversation. To me, that's fascinating. Like, what does that mean, for the fact that someone like that is in office, or there's the gun-toting, the person who just got, I don't know where she is from, but she like, I'm bringing my Glock to Congress.
Oh yeah, Lauren, right, from Colorado.
Yeah, like the fact that those are the radical, the like radical people that are getting recognition in Congress, and that they're getting so much attention, and that there's always used to be this belief that if you were like, it was the radical, like liberals that were the crazy people, right? But
it's also kind of a continuation of the Tea Party too.
Yeah.
And like where, and how that was considered like so out there, and oh my goodness, like how are they getting this voice, and how are, like, how is this such a strong movement? And then that kind of like leveled out for a little bit, and then is spiking now as, this, what are we even calling this anymore?
I don't know. But I think Marjorie Taylor Greene makes like the Tea Party people look like they're like, normal. Yeah. I mean, that's the weird thing is like the conservatism and the radical right conspiracy theories that are popping up, and the fact that shift is moving so far to the right makes what we used to think as moderates,
right,
or we used to think as like conservatives, seem like they're moderate. People that we thought were super conservative, now we're like, oh, that's a normal point. That's a middle of the road point of view, right?
Right.
And We have a question from Trenton for Stephanie. Trenton says, can you describe the phases of the retrograde period, how it breaks down, and how that zigzag, and when it's officially over? So can you talk a little bit more about Mercury in retrograde, like what the period of time is, like, and what happens before and after, maybe a little bit, and when we're going to see the end to that.
Yeah, perfect. So, and maybe the place to start with that is just because I feel like the answer is inherent in the question. What is retrograde?
Right. What is Mercury? Right.
And then what is Mercury retrograde? So retrograde is the apparent backward motion of a planet in the sky. People are like, Mercury's moving backwards. It obviously didn't pick up and decide to change directions. It just appears to be going backwards. So here's a little sort of diagram with my finger, which is, here's Mercury, and it's just going forward. And then it's time for it to go retrograde. It turns around, quote, turns around, and then its retrograde is over. It then starts again going forward. So there is a part of the zodiac that during that retrograde, and it's different every time, gets this 1 pass, 2 pass, 3 pass, right? Okay. So the retrograde phase is the retrograde phase, meaning this time it's January 30th to February 20th. This is when Mercury is officially retracing its steps.
Okay.
But there's something called the shadow period, which is that first pass here and that third pass there.
Right.
And the shadow period, some people call it Mercury retrograde light. I don't look at it that way. Again, that's not because the way I look at it is right. Just that's not how I look at it. How I look at it, there's a 3-part story, right? The first part is this first initial, and I don't remember when it started, so I'm going to make this up right now. It's somewhere at the beginning of January, where Mercury first went into this territory, right? And it's something opened up for you. You don't yet know what it is. But then during the retrograde pass, because you're having the revisiting, you get some clarity. So this is what I would say to people is, when you think about January 30th to February 20th, and that's February 20th is not here yet, think about what perhaps are you actually revisiting from earlier in January? What has come back? What idea? Now we can look at it from 2 perspectives. One, it's in the sign of Aquarius. So it's about issues of collective society, logistics, science, all of that. But it's also, if you know your chart, you can see where it's happening too. So then you you get that different vision. And then from the 20th for about 3 weeks, you have that third pass. So this is when you can take, I realized that the retrograde gave me an ability to review what happened in January. Now I'm going to synthesize that, right? Okay. You get this synthesis perspective for the 3 weeks after it's over. So from February 20th to say the 15th of March.
Oh, interesting.
Was that clear?
Trenton, Trenton, let us know if that answered your question. If anybody else,
Oliver also had a comment. He said, "I always happen to catch you when I need your guidance and perspective, Stephanie."
Oh, we always need Stephanie's guidance and perspective.
That's true.
It's been super helpful.
And I would say I just want to readjust Trenton's question, and maybe is think about this retrograde period, like Kim said, right? Reassess, go back over, retrace your steps, reconsider, get a new angle, and then then you take that, and then that gives you, that's the partner to this other level of understanding you have. So when the retrograde's over, then you can communicate with more clarity, more foundation, right? More of a holistic understanding.
Oh my God, that's great. That's super helpful. And Trenton said, yes, you answered his question. And then so interestingly, talk a little bit, not to get too much on the Mercury, because I know we have other stuff to talk about, but because it's Mercury retrograde, as opposed to last year we had a Mars retrograde, which was a totally different thing. And then there's Venus retrograde, which is only a totally different thing. What is it about Mercury retrograde that usually causes technical difficulties or, technology to be annoying and, have your computer have to restart? randomly.
We get it. Sorry. No, just kidding. Sorry.
By the way, that's a great question. And that's such like a meta question, like going back to something that wasn't clear related to communication, which is exactly what Mercury retrograde is, right? So it's the retrograde of Mercury that has to do with communication, transportation, understanding, bridging things together.
Right.
So during Mercury retrograde, the aim is for clarity and like building a stronger foundation for your communication, your education, how you process knowledge, how you share knowledge, the platforms you use for that. I'm going to get to the communication snafus, I can't even say that word, in a second. Venus retrograde, which happens every 18 months. We had that last year too. We have that begins at the end of December this year.
Oh, okay.
It's Venus, the planet of love and value and money and pleasure, going backwards. So you're reassessing what you love, how you love, what's pleasurable, what's worth it.
Okay.
Mars retrograde happens every 2+ years, and that's Mars, the planet of the warrior and champion, doing that revisiting. So you are you're like creating new strategies. You're re-strategizing. You're assessing what you desire and how you go about getting what you desire. So those are the three. The thing is, right, people say, or, that their communications do go awry during Mercury retrograde.
Right. All the time.
And sometimes it's because, again, if as above, so below, right? If the planet is going backwards and it's going in a different direction and it's going in a different speed and a different pace, so should we. So maybe, some people sort of speak about it poetically, like there's crossed wires, right? So that's why sometimes there's those delays. Or like for you, like your computer had to reset.
Yeah.
Invariably, it was like, oh wait, that's a disruption, but everything was fine.
Yeah.
And even if like your computer restarted 5 minutes later, it's giving you a different perspective, like, oh, the world didn't end. Do you know what I mean? Like so it's almost like giving us a way to reassess too how we relate to our technology devices, our dependence, our relationships with them, how we go about. And it's oftentimes thought too that like it sort of detaches us a little bit of that from them, so we could realize like, oh, there's actually other ways we can get to the same destination.
Yeah, totally.
Right. So, but it is the other thing I would say, and this also goes back to the question that Trenton asked, or made me think of this, is like the days around Mercury retrograde beginning. Actually, you can say this for Venus and Mars too, but let's use Mercury retrograde. And the days around it ending, those are the times when Mercury energy is really strong. So that's when you may find yourself with like an onslaught of like everyone wants your attention because they want to have a conversation with you, or so many emails in your inbox you don't know what to do, or like you can't help yourself like pressing refresh to the Guardian live feed, and like every 2 minutes they're coming out with something. Like there's a lot of information, and so it's really, really important to like meter yourself and to go slow and to like make sure that you hit reply versus reply all on those group threads if that's what you want to do. Like you really have to especially pace yourself around the times of the beginning and the end.
So it's also about protecting yourself from misinformation, like making sure you're conscious of not just how, like with what tools you're using to communicate, but what you're saying. Is that also?
Without question, right? And also maybe it's also like, is this actually what I want to say? Is this the best way to say this? Is this worth saying? It's about, that's why I love the retrogrades, because you get a different vantage point, right? It's like it has you be like, oh, I can't just take this, how I do things and this for granted. Like, is there a better way? Let me rethink this.
Yeah, people are always scared of them. I mean, I always be like, oh my God, no, it's Mercury retrograde. Something crazy is going to happen. But I mean, I think if you have that attitude that, hey, if you're just more aware of what could happen and more conscientious of the possibility, then it's not a thing to be like freaked out about. But
absolutely,
those are good words for nearly every situation.
That's true.
Like, if I'm being quite honest, like,
that's true.
Roll with it, try and gather information, and kind of like
Right.
understand it's going to be a little different than you expect. Like it's a lot easier to muster through.
Right. And that's my overarching thought about astrology. Like I'm not as deep in astrology as Chavi is, although it's a constant conversation in our household with every single person we know, every single person we meet. It's like literally an overarching theme in everything we do. And even though I don't understand the nuances, I feel like it's just like a roadmap, right? It's like it's not a prediction. It's not like tarot cards. It's not like reading your future. It's not like, like being psychic. I mean, it's more about just here's like a roadmap for what might be coming down the pike and how it might impact you and how it's going to impact the universe. And it gives you like a insight into like the zeitgeist of what's happening in the world around you that I think some people are not as conscientious about, right? Sure. And we try and be super conscientious about it. One, because we're into astrology, and also because we deal in this communication genre because we sell real estate and we're on Facebook and we're talking, like we're constantly putting out information and getting information. So it's important for us to be in tune. But I think a lot of folks are just like,
well, sometimes you just like to have a reason outside of yourself to go, why the hell is everything going the way it's going right now? What is going on? And it's like, oh, okay, there's an otherworldly or planetary, explanation for what I'm possibly feeling. It's not just me.
Right.
And like sometimes that's good to feel too.
It's totally sometimes good to feel.
As I jokingly call it, like name a planet, blame a planet.
Name a planet.
There you go.
But I want to loop back to what you said before when you said like that was really good advice, which I agree. I would also say that that's a really good way of looking at this year with the Saturn Uranus square, which is like the rolling with it. Like you don't, and not to be like nervous, like, oh my God, I don't know what's around the corner.
Right.
But invariably, none of us really know what's around the corner anyway, if you really think about it. But it's just sort of like, okay, you know what? I'm going to like stay bouncy. I'm going to like know if like if that road I can't pass because there's, it's under construction, that I have the wherewithal to know that a detour does exist, right? That I can readily pivot, that I can figure it out. And I think that knowing that will take us all really far this year. And it's not just that, like, I do want to mention that, and it's not limited to the times that you have the exact alignment, but the first alignment is next week on February 17th. Okay. The second one is June 14th. And the last one is December 23rd or the 24th if you live on the East Coast. So this is like really all year. Really, really all year. So, and it's interesting that the impeachment trial is lining up with that, and probably the verdict is lining up with that first one.
That's true. The entire time you were explaining how Mercury retrograde works, it's like, oh, early January we went through this section, and now we're kind of reevaluating everything that happened, and then like, okay, what's going to happen? Once we get through that reevaluation period. Anyway, that was where my mind was at when you were talking.
Yeah, that's almost perfectly in line with the impeachment, right? Because what happened in that shadow period of June 6th, and now we're reevaluating it during the impeachment trial and trying to figure out,
listening to it, watching it, reading all the video, and talking about like what it means and why it means that, and whether or not that has grounds, and
right.
Yeah, like you're right, like re-seeing the video, like literally, like in recounting, re-seeing the video.
Right, and I'm curious, like regardless of the verdict, if like once Mercury retrograde is over, will there be new thoughts that come out after the fact that people have had this time to like reevaluate the situation and talk through what happened and, re-look at the situation from different perspectives. So, Trenton has another question. Trenton is like full of interesting questions today.
Trenton did his homework.
What?
Trenton did his homework.
He did. If anybody else has questions, bring them on.
Yeah.
So can Stephanie clarify the role of Saturn as Senec's father time versus Jupiter, the ruler lawgiver? And they both seem to be forces of tradition, which is, I don't know what Jupiter plays in.
Oh, and then he followed up just trying to triangulate how Saturn in particular opposes Uranus in a square.
Okay. So 3 things, right? Saturn and Jupiter came together in December.
Right.
At the grand conjunction.
Right.
Then Saturn's right now, I need my props. Saturn, I don't know.
You have a Saturn?
So Saturn, we'll use this as Saturn.
Okay.
I think my clients are just like, whoa, Stephanie's desk must be full of props.
That's awesome.
Like illustrate facts.
We should get you little planet props for the next, like, here's Saturn, here's Jupiter.
Actually should. That's a good idea. So here's Saturn. Saturn is right now, like Jupiter is, in the sign of Aquarius. This is Uranus. It's in the sign of Taurus. Aquarius and Taurus are 90 degrees, 3 signs away from each other in the zodiac. Okay. So they're actually forming a square, not an opposition. So not opposed. I just want to say that.
So it's like noon and 3 o'clock then?
Exactly, like noon and 3 o'clock.
And that's what a square means, right? In astrology.
That's what a square means. Now, the square aspect is very tense, right? Like think about like actually this works very well in Seattle. You're at like an intersection that's either a 4-way stop or like a no-way stop. And everyone's like, no, you first, no, you first, no, you first. You know, if you're like that, that's sort of a little bit of like a square. It's like you're seeing things from different angles, right? You're sort of, there's a tension. Now, it's in the rectification, it's in the awareness of the tension and how things do not seem aligned, that if you can take that into consideration and see the whole picture, that I think that the healing, the wisdom, the knowledge comes, right? So that's why squares they're very galvanizing, and they can galvanize, I think, evolution if we're conscious with them. Now, going back to Saturn is like old man time, like that's its archetype, right? It's the senex, it's the wise one, it's the wisdom that comes with experience and time. And with that, it's like, this is how we've always done things. It's like thought to be sort of like conservative, if you will. I look at Jupiter more like, Jupiter is also thought of as like the planet relating to like justice and law. And it's more Uranus, like Saturn being the senex, Uranus is like the puer. Like that's the one that's like the rebel, the teenager. So we do have this sort of square off between and I don't want to say, the old one is not always the wise one, right? That's the question too. Where does wisdom live?
So like Trenton used the word traditional, like, so the Saturn's like about tradition, establishment, maybe.
Exactly. Establishment, tradition, more conservative by the books, based upon what happened before. Whereas Uranus is more of the renegade, that's nice, you guys are all going this way, let's try it this way. So that's more of that sort of teenage rebellious renegade energy. The question is, and getting back to some of the things you were talking about before, like, where does wisdom live? Does it live in the been there, I'm 80 years old, I've been in the Senate for 50 years, like, does it live there? Or does it live in someone who's like first time congressperson, right? But does it also, but to your point too, we used to think like, oh, the Uranus would be like the radical left, right? And the progressives. Maybe that's, I think it's going to dance back and forth. Like that might be like Saturn in terms of like, this is, it's discipline and it's like, it has integrity. And the radical Uranus may be that just like, wait, whatever that radicalness is, So it's going to be interesting to see during the year who holds what. And that sort of trade-off, that trade-off, if you will.
Yeah, because it seems like just because we think of tradition or like someone who has been around a while as being wise and having wisdom, that's not necessarily true. And as we've seen, some of the old guard, that's running our country, certainly I wouldn't call them wise. Or actually acting out of wisdom, sometimes acting out of tradition is not the best course of action. But I do think it's almost, it feels like, and I mean, if I'm wrong, tell me, but it feels like there's almost like a battle in this revolutionary, like the revolutionary battle is which revolutionaries are going to succeed. Is it,
Right.
The Black Lives Matter progressive revolution, or is it the QAnon, radical, like neo white supremacist revolution? Like, which side? Because it feels like there is movement on both those sides. Now, obviously, we know what side we want to win, and I believe, and I think most of the country believes, that there's more people who, obviously, because they elected Joe Biden and not Trump, that there's more people erring on the side of, yes, this is what's right and good, and this is if we're going to embrace any kind of radical philosophy, which I don't think this is necessarily radical philosophy to not be racist, but there are some people who think that way.
They do. They do.
That's the side that we have to embrace and promote. But I think it's going to be difficult for us that other side's not going to go away. Right? Like, just because Trump is out of the White House does not mean that all those people that stormed the Capitol are going to be like, oh, well, we're done now.
Right.
We're just going to
population is not going, or half of the voting population is not going to just say, oh yeah, that was fun, we're done.
We're done. Right.
See ya.
No, they're not. I mean, and I think we're delusional to think they're just going to slink off into the sunset and go away. Like, there's going to be stuff that's probably going to happen this year that's going to cause clashes on both those sides. Do you think that's a legit?
Absolutely, right. And I think it's also like there's that whole, if we think about there's lots of shakeup, or even shakeup of structure, like thinking and maybe it's also the shakeup of our perceptions, like going back to like the older person in the Senate, and like, does that mean that they're the wise one? But then we can say like, and but not to discount also that, because maybe I don't know if it's Biden as who's very Saturn,
right, that's true, yeah.
But I just also a little bit of historical context, or astro-historical context, if you will. The last two times that Saturn and Uranus were in this type of square, which is the closing square, the one right before was 1975 to 77. There you actually saw a lot of invention in technology. And I think that's something we need to keep our eye on in terms of like disruptive technologies this time around. Microsoft and Apple and the Commodore and all of these things happening. We also saw, and it wasn't limited to this, but like it was somewhere in that arc of history right then, in terms of like the Red Brigade and what was going, with the Troubles and what was going on in the Basque Separatist movement. There was a lot of that sort of revolutionary stuff going on. And then early 30s as well, we had this. But so just in terms of also, that time was very, there's a lot of anarchy, right?
Oh, right. But that anarchy kind of causes innovation. So it's like disruption that causes or creates innovation.
Interesting.
Right. And that's how I think we should use it. I mean, I think that's how we, it's like, we could say like, oh my God, like pivoting, that's so great. We get to pivot. But if somebody else pivots in a way that you don't want them to pivot, that could shake you up. So the question is, how do you find a sense of stand and power by saying, okay, how do I want to innovate? How do I want to shake things up, right? So you take that energy, so you're not just like standing here doing nothing while the whole world is like doing this sort of shake up. Like you then can use that to move forward for your personal, professional, collective aims. And I think that's important for all of us to do. So
before we, unless there's any more questions before we wrap up, I do want to kind of like twist this a little bit, or like steer a little bit toward like, how might this be impacting real estate? Since Roy and I are in real estate, and our folks that are listening might be in real estate, or they might be clients who are thinking about buying or selling. Like, what does this Uranus Saturn square, what might that be projecting, or how might that cause people to reevaluate or change or influence how they choose to move forward in a major life change, like moving to a new house or buying a new house or selling their house or moving to a new city? Or
so with the disclaimer that I don't have a crystal ball.
No, right. Always a disclaimer, no crystal balls in this anywhere.
I'm not a doctor nor play one on television, and I don't have a crystal ball. So I think that, what's interesting is that it's not just Uranus squaring Saturn, it's Uranus is in the sign of Taurus. Taurus is the sign of tangible goods and tangible property, and also the sign of the earth.
Right.
So, Taurus is like your money, your stability, your security, the feeling of that, let alone then the choices you make and the purchases you make that might be part of the reflection of that, right? So I think that is something that might be really coming into focus for people, is like, what does that mean? What does that mean to feel stability? What does that mean to feel security? And how do I have that inform the choices that I make in terms of my investment, and also in terms of, my investment, but also like, what would that home look like that would also, if I'm finding the courage to actually claim what I really want.
Yeah.
You know what? Everyone told me that I should get this kind of house and this is what my parents did and da-da-da. It's like, wait a minute. I want a home that really suits these other months of my needs. I would also say too, you may find that people want a home that has that sort of sense of flexibility, right? Like, oh, it has that space. You know what? If it turned out I have a kid, or if it turned out I end up working from home more, there's enough flexibility in that I can wall that off, or I can combine those rooms. Like, I think thinking about, and I think last year kind of woke us all up to this, like, life is not just like going along. We don't know where we're going to have to pivot.
No.
So how can you also have a home or an apartment or condo that like gives you some of that? That's bouncy.
Right.
A bouncy property. I mean, I think that's really interesting, because when I think of the fact that you're talking about Uranus being like new guard and like innovation and thinking out of the box, and Taurus is like, stubborn stability, or like groundedness, like those seem like they could be at odds, but instead, or I don't know, maybe they are at odds, or maybe they're just that like you said, that idea of like, okay, I still want stability, but I don't want it in the way that I thought I wanted it.
Exactly. How is it redefined? Yeah. How are you redefining it?
Right.
I'm gonna sorry, I've been over here daydreaming while I'm listening about like what this could potentially mean.
Yeah.
Thinking about how like the last year has been all about like, holy shit, I'm stuck at home.
Right.
How do I make my home work? Oh my God, I'm in a 1-bedroom apartment. I need more space. How do I buy a 3-bedroom house? All of that. We're also seeing the potential that hopefully by the end of the year, the majority of us are going to have some sort of vaccine. And I don't know if you guys are thinking like I am, but there is nowhere I want to be more than away from here, and just like get out and like do something, do anything.
Right.
And that could have the effect on our market of like, no, like now, like, okay, we've been given these new rules that we don't have to work. We can work from home, and we're given this new ability to actually go and travel. And
right.
Is that going to be a situation in which maybe we're not going to buy a house this year and we're just going to re-up our apartment or stay where we are, and kind of curb that, like, oh my God, I have to get a house today. And it could be a potential pivot of like, what? I don't like today. I need to go to Maui and get out of here, or like something like that could potentially happen.
Totally.
In the regard of like, okay, what I thought I absolutely needed to have is not what I thought I absolutely needed to have. It's this other thing.
Or and I think it could also make people decide like, okay, I want space, and I want some place where I can get space and have the freedom, but maybe instead of buying a house in Seattle or in the city I live in or upgrading, maybe I go buy a vacation home. Maybe I go buy a cabin. Maybe I go buy something that's not in town that I can go get that feeling at when I need it, but I could stay, I mean, who knows?
And I'm working with a client now who's really interesting, because I've been talking with people about this opportunity for a while, but they're buying as a collective.
Right.
So
right.
They have
collective areas.
There you go.
Planning on all living in the home together and paying rent towards building equity when there's only going to be 2 people on the mortgage to start with, so it's like they're, as a group, they're buying, they're collecting their power in order to purchase to stay in the city.
Yeah.
And like, that's because that's what's important to them, is having all of those things without each individually being able to grab that brass ring, you know.
Right. We might be seeing the rebirth of cooperative living, right? I mean, I remember when I first moved to Seattle, that was all the rage, like cooperatives. We're going to live in a cooperative. We're going to, you know, build cooperative housing. And people talked about it all the time. And then that kind of like fell away, right? And people stopped wanting to live in that kind of environment. And you know, there's a difference between density and cooperative living. I mean, living in a condo is sort of cooperative because you have to share hallways and common spaces, but you still have your own space, and you're not sharing common spaces that you use every day.
Or your collective is 6 people instead of 60 people.
Right.
You know, so instead of living in a giant apartment building, you know, you're still living communally, but you can pod with your community,
right?
You know, in that way, so that you're not, you know, you're not in this situation of
right. And maybe it's only 2 people. Like I have clients that I'm working with who are not a couple, but they're buying a house together because they're like, hey, we have the same profession. We work sort of the similar hours. We're really good friends. And hey, we can buy this much house together as opposed to this much house alone.
Exactly.
Right? And we don't have any reason not to want to live together because we're already like, you know, comfortable in that situation. So I think we might see more and more of that, like people banding together, right? To like innovate how we live to get what we really need on this end, even if we're giving up this on this other end.
Well, and I mean, just to take it another step in real estate too, we might see a lot more people banding together to change the design review and to change what types of construction can happen.
Right.
You know, instead of only allowing for 3 or 4 level townhouses, maybe get some granny flats in the mix so that we have, you know, multi-level housing, but on a flat level so that, you know, people that are not able-bodied and they can climb stairs, you know, have other options to them, you know.
Right. And
we might see more of that. And we might see, you know, people getting real fed up with having to waive every single contingency and pay $100,000 over asking just to get a thing, you know, not stand for that anymore.
Yeah.
Just thinking.
I think honestly, all of that and more, right? It's like I feel like the norm, even in real estate like that, is about to be disrupted.
Right.
Right. And also how, if we think about disruptive technology, it's meant to be technology like computers and networks and things like that. But the way that the systems you use to go about getting things are open to being shaken up and reinvented.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah. And that, I mean, we talk about that word disruption in real estate all the freaking time. And sometimes I get so sick of hearing it because people are like, this is going to be disruptive. And I'm like, you know, it's almost like anything that's innovative is disruptive.
Right. Well, I mean, and just think about like the tradition and the old guard of our industry and like how it's very much like most people don't get to see this, but our system is very playbook.
Right.
You know, like it's very specific in how it's done. And like, I'm sorry, but it could use some disruption.
No, I mean, I just had this conversation with some folks on Facebook about how, like COVID forced us to reevaluate how we do our business, but but we're so stubborn in this industry about really reevaluating like what we're taught that as soon as it was okay to do open houses again, you know, everyone's like, oh my God, I gotta do an open house. I can't wait to have open houses. And I'm like, really? Like, can we not think more out? Like a whole year of not being able to do open houses has not changed anyone's perspective about the fact that is the first thing they want to do. Well, I mean, it's changed mine too. But, so, I mean, who knows? Maybe this Uranus Saturn Square will push some of those, old guard things, out of the mix at some point, and we'll get some,
I mean, Matterport's going public, so who knows what's going to happen now with 3D walkthroughs. Okay, Trenton had another question. I know we're rolling up on an hour.
Yeah.
So let's see if we can squeeze this in.
Really fast.
One last question. Any tip from the upcoming book, rituals, ideas, anything that might help mitigate the specific tensions of this year? Or maybe we just need to get the book.
Right.
How about yes and yes? And by the way, for anyone who pre-orders the book now, they're just send me a note, because then I can send you to a website and you get like a free like sneak peek of some of the flower essence chapter. And you can get the book anywhere that you buy books. But let's talk about that. So I would say this year, some of the really good rituals or practices would be a couple of fold. One, I'm always a big believer in like having some rescue remedy flower essences in your pocket, right? Because again, if there's going to be like, I didn't expect that was out of the blue, it's just a nice thing to know that you have to like tamp down that sense of like stress that might come. Two, I would say shake things up. You know, like if you have this tried and true, and my day always starts like this, and then I do this, then I do this, then I do this, then I do this kind of exercise. I always go here, shake it up, change things around, right? In your routine, in your practice. If you are a person who does 20 minutes a day of sitting meditation, twice a week, do walking meditation, like just change things up. Give yourself more valence, right? A more multivalent approach. I think that itself will help people sort of prime themselves to, again, be more bouncy, have a more light touch, have more space, and a more, not have that rigidity, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Great. So that's good. And I think that goes for all of us. I think it's super important that, we are very big believers of business plan, have a plan. But I think it's also important this year in particular to make sure you're constantly reevaluating that plan and looking at that plan and making sure you're not so rigid in your trajectory that you're ignoring what's happening around you, right? Especially this year. So it's a good year to be reevaluating and re-exploring what's, important to you, and maybe like stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit and trying something new,
but still take care of yourself.
Right?
Redefining your comfort zone and redefining comfort, right? That also feels very for us.
Great. Oh my God, this has been so awesome, Stephanie. We've had all this great conversation online, all these folks that have never but we don't normally see because they want to see you. You're so fabulous. And we should have you on like every 3 months if we can.
If you're up for it.
Please.
I know. So thanks for folks. I just feel like I didn't even have a chance to acknowledge Blaze Hamlin. Hi, Blaze. Thanks for hopping on. And Maddie Linder, thanks for hopping on and checking out our time with Stephanie. And you can watch the whole broadcast if you missed some. If you have questions for Stephanie, you can DM us or put them in the chat. And do we have a link you can send Chavi that we can put in your chat for where to sign up for the purchase the book?
Yes, all of that. I'll give you my website. I'll give you that. All of that.
Great. So Chavi will pop
as well.
Yeah. We'll put it in the blog.
We can put it in the notes.
Right. So you can go to the blog and podcast notes and find that information. So you could buy Stephanie's old book, The Complete Book of Dreams, and her new book. What is the new book called again?
The Complete Guide to Astrological Self-Care.
Perfect.
Complete Guide to Astrological Self-Care, which we're all going to need this year. Let me tell you. Awesome. So thanks for joining, Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. I love our Pisces Posse.
Pisces Posse. Woo!
Yeah. Happy early birthday, you guys.
Thank you.
So next week we have another fabulous show with Carson St. Clair.
Awesome.
Who's a burlesque performer. And she was very active, and she's still active in the Black Lives Matter movement. And she's going to be a fun and feisty conversation, I'm sure.
Conversation. Cool.
And then after that, we're going to once a month.
Yes.
So we're going to kick it off March 3rd, my birthday.
Your birthday.
And 2 days after Roy's birthday.
That's right.
With a little bit of a Pisces fest. We're going to have Michael on the show. We might also have Remington on the show. So to be kind of...
Yeah, because his birthday is this week, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, we're going to have... It'll be like an Aquarius Pisces crossover event.
I like it.
Right?
That'll be fun.
And then it looks like on April 7th, our first show of April, we're going to have Ace, the architect, who's running for mayor in Seattle. He'll be our first mayoral candidate to be on the show.
Talk about mixing it up as a community.
I know.
About mayor candidates.
That'll be fascinating. Hopefully we'll have more mayoral candidates on the show, or at least be talking about what's happening with that election as we get later in the year. So keep an eye out for all those great shows. And yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in today for our
thanks everyone.
our little hang out with Stephanie and our little access to the stars, so we can be prepped for a fabulous year.
Yeah.
So
all right, well, let's say goodbye, everyone.